WDTFX.
Once again, here is Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your hosts, Dustin Lunt and Jake Trowbridge.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Tuesday if you're joining us live here. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are listening to the show after the fact, good morning, afternoon, and evening, and night, wherever you are.
Yeah.
What's that there, Jake?
What's that thing that Jim Carrey says in The Truman Show? You know have you ever seen The Truman Show?
Yeah. Wasn't it something like that? I felt like it was very similar.
I thought like you were going down that path. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. And I think that
absolutely.
We are. Okay. Yeah. Then I love it. I loved every part about that opening then.
Yes. For not speaking for a week, we are still on the same page. Don't worry.
We've done it. So much time apart. We were talking about our Thanksgiving activities before we hopped on the show. Hope everybody listening out there had an amazing Thanksgiving time. I had a long time in Austin, Texas. If anybody's out there from Austin, your city's beautiful. I was a big fan. I'll probably go back at some point. Nice. But I will say, I did not watch a ton of football aside from Thanksgiving Day when I did see all three of the games. But Sunday, I did miss a little bit, including the majority of the Packers game, which we did not talk about, Dustin. I was at a concert for the majority of that thing, got out, went to a bar, caught like the last quarter. This was post Aaron Rodgers injury.
Mm-hmm.
So I gotta know. I feel like we should have talked about this a lot more, but what do we think? Is this Jordan Love time, Dustin?
Well, if you listen to what Aaron Rodgers says, which no one should, let's just put that out there and be clear. But, as long as they're mathematically in it, he wants to play. But
whose math? Is it his math or like the consensus math? Like, is it the math where he's going to do his own research and then determine that he's not actually technically out of the playoffs? Because that could go a whole different way.
I don't know, but all I know is I think with the two injuries, with his thumb that he's been dealing with all season long here, and now this rib injury, it's like, just shut him down. We as Packer fans are not going to the playoffs. And even if we were for some ungodly reason able to sneak in, we wouldn't do anything anyway. It'd be an embarrassment. So
it'd be a first round elimination for sure. Yeah. And it would just worsen our draft pick for next year.
Exactly.
So what do we
and I'd rather see what we've gotten Jordan Love, since we do have to pay him that 5th-year option this offseason. If we do keep him, so I'd kind of like to know if we're going to pay a quarterback, $20 million, if he's going to be at least halfway decent, as opposed
to
actually
want to know what your investment looks like.
I know, crazy.
Wow.
But that's what I want to happen. Do I think that's what's going to happen? No, I think Rodgers will continue to play, and we'll just never know. We're going to go into this offseason just full of questions as usual. And my heart will be broken. Yes.
We're not going to know what to do for the skill position players for fantasy next year. We're not going to know what Jordan Love. Mm-hmm. Although, if that 2 drives was any indication, Christian Watson's going to be just fine if Jordan Love is under center next year. So that's good to know, at least.
Yeah, I was surprised when I woke up on Tuesday morning because I went to bed at halftime. Me getting up early for work and all. So I missed all of it, and I was like, what, Jordan Love played and actually looks like he played well? I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah. So I feel vindicated in my wait and see approach with Jordan Love. One game, one regular season game, I should say, doth not make a quarterback projection. And so everybody needed to chill a little bit on him. And hopefully this has caused some people to do that.
I hope so too. But let's move on. We've got another great episode this evening for everyone. We're talking planning for the fantasy playoffs. They're right around the corner here. What moves should you make or could you be looking at making to help give you that push either into the playoffs, if you're right on the cusp, or to really just push over the edge and give you that ship? Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But before we get into it, Jake, what are you drinking this evening?
I am drinking one of the last of the fridge beers. where I, again, need to restock. But I was gone for a week, so I didn't restock beforehand. But it's a salted caramel porter. It's from Pigeon Hill Brewing, which is in Muskegon, Michigan. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It says brewed in beautiful Muskegon, Michigan. It's in the fridge still because it's very, very sweet, intensely sweet. And so, it's like a one and done beer for sure, but it's not bad.
Nice.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking, it's called Coconut Hunk Boy. It's a coconut porter from Oliphant Brewing. And the can is terrific. It's got a dog.
Coconut Hunk Boy.
Yeah, and this is out of Somerset, Wisconsin. It is just a very solid coconut porter. I like it a lot. If I see it at the store again, I will probably buy another 4-pack because I did enjoy this one.
That wins the name off.
Mhm.
That's the best.
Oh yeah,
That's one where you buy it regardless of how good you think it might or might not be, just because of the
Mhm.
name.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
did-
Which I did,
did a
and
good
it worked
job.
out well.
Perfect. Love when a plan comes into place like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we had a beer bet last week,
Sure did.
and for those of you that forgot, I don't know how you'd forget anything we say on the show, but for those of you that forgot, it was the New York Giants backfield, which I took, versus the Dallas Cowboys backfield, which Jake took. And what happened? 24.6 points for each backfield. What the hell's going on there?
The hell? This has to be in our history the first ever official tie for a beer bet. I feel
I think
I don't
so.
recall any other one happening. And the fact that it was an entire backfield, it wasn't one player versus one player, wasn't just Saquon versus Zeke. It was all of these guys. And just to make sure, I wanted my math to be impeccable here as I did the breakdown of this, because essentially there was 3 players for the Giants with obviously Saquon at the top, and then Gary Brightwell, Matt Breida got involved. And then it was just Zeke and Tony on the other side. But yes, the math holds up. It is a clean tie. So I feel like this is a situation, neither of us needs to do a shot, but I feel like we have to at least cheers on this thing.
I'm going to do a shot.
Are you really? I didn't bring up anything for a shot, Dustin.
Just because it's a tie. Just because it's a tie. I'm like, you know what? What the hell? I'm just going to do a shot anyway.
All right. Well, I'm going to take some big gulps out of this sweet, sweet son of a bitch that's in front of me, and that will be how we match up.
All right. Well, congratulations on the tie, I guess.
Yeah, we are both fantasy football prognosticators
/ geniuses.
Geniuses and sexy people. Let's throw that in there for the tie. All right. Cheers, man.
All right. Cheers.
Oh, I wish I'd done a shot. Oh, it's too much. It's too much. Muskegon, you got to temper down the sweetness next time.
All right. So, Jake, that just leaves one more thing here to take care of before we get into the main event of the episode here. And it's something we like to call the drunk trade of the week.
Drunk, hammered drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
We, of course, have another one coming from Reddit.
Thanks, Reddit.
As it's always a bastion of these drunk trades. And this one is from MWM031089 on Reddit.
Solid name.
Apologies to all the 30,000+ other MWMs that are out there on Reddit.
I'm thinking it's a birth date. 03/10/89.
Oh, look at
MWM
you.
our initials. I know.
You Sherlock Holmesian motherfucker here. Just
I have my
determining
moment.
out of the gate. Wow.
That's probably going to be the best moment of the show for me, just so we're clear.
Clip it. Let's clip it. Let's post it so everybody can relish in your smartness going forward. But for right now, we have this drunk trade, and it's an interesting one. So they said, and this was submitted a couple of weeks ago, but even then they said this was a couple of weeks further back, that a manager in their league was complaining about having too many Jags, which, Dustin, of course, we would never be saying, we have proclaimed our love for the Jags many times on this. But they had Christian Kirk and James Robinson, who was a Jaguar at the time. This was before getting traded to the Jets. So the offer was this. MWM offered Drake London for Christian Kirk, given that London had put up a nice stat line on the Rams very previously to that. The other person accepted, as they were many bottles of wine deep across the globe in Europe. Now I have me a Kirk, they say. And they should be, Dustin, pretty thrilled that they have a Kirk, considering what they gave away. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Although it's not, I wouldn't say it's super lopsided. I mean, I love what Christian Kirk has done this year. I don't know that next year he will be the number one on the team. I have a feeling the Jags could go out and spend some draft capital on a day one receiver to give them that young stud, especially with how deep this class is supposed to be coming out here in 23. And Drake London, he was a high first round pick this last year for Atlanta. Although you have to like what the Jags are doing a little bit more. They're a little bit further along in their rebuild here than what Atlanta's doing. So, I mean, if Atlanta gets a better quarterback, I think it'd be okay for Drake London because we have seen him do it in flashes. But I think just for the production for the rest of this season, and even, given the time of this trade, I think, Kirk was definitely the winning side on this one. But I think long-term, it's still way too early to tell.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. And this is on me for not asking clarification from MWM whether this was redraft or dynasty. If this is redraft, I consider this a slam dunk trade.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I actually was just curious because given the time frame with that Rams game, I estimate it's about week 4-ish that they probably put this trade through. And since then, Christian Kirk averaging 13.3 fantasy points and is the wide receiver 21 overall. Drake London, not so much. 6.5 fantasy points, not even cracking the top 50 for wide receivers. And I don't see that changing for the rest of this season, as you're suggesting. But yeah, going forward, you just hope that either Arthur Smith is ousted or Arthur Smith figures out how to actually utilize this very talented wide receiver in Drake London.
I have a feeling that neither one of those things are going to happen.
Really?
I think the Falcons are doing just good enough that, I mean, they're in the hunt for the NFC South, believe it or not. And so I think they're doing just enough, or he's doing just enough with the talent they have on this roster that he's going to be given at least one more year. So,
do you think a quarterback change will help Drake London in that case? Because, Desmond Ridder is waiting in the wings. Or do we think that Mariota gets another chance then too, since they're also doing just enough?
He very well could. I think he could. I mean, a third round pick for quarterback in the draft, that's not great draft capital. I mean, typically outside the first round, and even the top 10 in the first round aren't very high hits in the NFL. So yeah, they have Ridder and they spent some draft capital on him, but the fact that with as poorly as, I mean, they're 4-8 now, I believe
so, but still very much in the hunt in that terrible
division. I know, but even given that fact that they're 4-8, that they even haven't given Ridder a sniff of the field yet, tells me he's probably not quite ready, and I don't know that he ever will be. I mean, I would love to see it. I hope they play him at some point, because I don't think Mariota is the long-term answer, but maybe they think something different. I don't know.
They could, because they seem kind of silly. And they might, again, rational coaching is not always to be a guarantee, nor is our perspective on the quarterback situations, to be fair. So we just like it for fantasy because it's change, and change is fun. I want to ask this, though, about the trade, going beyond the players. I love this part about the person on the other side was actually the recipient, was the drunk person clearly here with the wine deep, but a global trade. I love this. And I wonder if there's something to be gleaned from, obviously know your league mates, number one, which is important because you have to account for the time differences in these scenarios. And you got to figure out when the other person might be cracking open that bottle of wine.
This is very
right?
true. Very true.
Strategy you don't hear talked about on enough other podcasts, I don't
know. But how many of us really are working with league mates on the other side of the globe?
I think more than you might think. Okay. I, for one, know that I have 2 leagues where I have at least one person in each of those leagues. That is now our home league. We know everybody. Clearly, we
Right.
can't use this to take.
And I know
advantage.
I have one league that, you know,
See?
but I'm just saying, as like a more casual fantasy football player,
I would like to know how
know,
many,
it's
what
just-
percentage of fantasy players reside in the U.S. versus those who reside outside of the U.S. I think that would be a fun poll. We might put that up on our Twitter page.
I
and
was
see what
going to say we
responses
should
we
do
get.
that.
Let's do that because I'm very curious about that. Genuinely, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not in any fantasy football leagues. Speaking of the World Cup, because I'm a dumb American, but I wonder how many outside, of the states do participate. So let's throw that up and we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Jake.
Woo.
All right, let's get into it here. Our main event, planning for the fantasy playoffs. So, I guess, Jake, let's start off. I want to ask you, what is just your general strategy this time of year? Say you're a borderline, like you're hovering in that like 6th playoff spot. Like generally, what are you thinking as far as like, am I really a contender? Like, do I want to make big moves? I know a lot of it's league dependent on your rules. Like if you have a trade deadline, if you don't, so I get it's not just a clean cut, like this is it, but just
Right.
as a general aside, like what are you thinking if you're kind of a borderline team right now?
If I'm flirting in that, let's say anywhere between the 5 to 8 ranked range, that sweet middle. My philosophy is the same in both redraft and dynasty at this point in the season. So if you're redraft, obviously you're just trying to make as many moves as possible to ensure that you stay in there. You're probably attacking the waiver wire in a way that is somewhat defensive as well, and trying to make sure that those teams that are ranked just around you don't get some of these key players who I'm sure we're going to talk about in a bit. So some of your strategy, you might even think that your lineup's all set, but you want to keep that in mind. But from dynasty perspective as well, if you are anywhere close, I don't care what you think of your team now. We talked about this a handful of episodes ago, really evaluating if you're a contender or a pretender. Go back and listen to that if you haven't. But if you're in that middle range, you're a contender right now, from my perspective. Doesn't mean you should be selling the farm to try to get yourself in a position to win it all necessarily, but you should absolutely be making moves as if you are a contender. So, again, not saying throw out all your first round picks if your trade deadline hasn't passed and try to get these players, but don't just fall back. Don't assume anything at this point and go for that. Is there anything that you do differently, I would say, between redraft and dynasty at this point based on that?
At this point, no. I mean, the only thing with dynasty is I think you get a little bit more flexibility as far as being able to make trades. You most likely you have future draft picks you can trade away to try to improve your team, or young players if you want like a proven veteran that's doing well. Where in redraft, it's like you have your roster and that's it, and you're a little bit more limited in the moves you can make.
Yeah.
And also with redraft, and maybe this is just my colored glasses here, just dealing with our home league here. I think it would be, especially if you're trying to trade with a team that's not doing well and getting a upgrade in a position. I think in home leagues that would be seen as collusion or an unsavory trade, because there's no reason for a team that's in last place or not going to make the playoffs to trade away their best players to another team to get nothing in return, essentially. So I think for redraft, it's a little bit trickier to pull off trades this time of year. I'm not saying it can't get done, but I think you definitely have to be a little bit more creative. Where in dynasty, it's easy to pull off trades. I shouldn't say easy, but easier to pull off trades at any given moment. Just dealing with different draft picks and roster construction, and if you're in a rebuild or a retool versus going for the championship, there's a lot more facets to go off of there in dynasty.
Agreed. And this is also the stage the bottom tier teams might already be pretty picked over. Those who are striving for contendership or are obviously on that path have probably already picked over those teams to a fair amount. People like to be vultures. They see that, 1-win team or 2-win team in that dynasty league. I think the majority of their win now assets might be gone, but it doesn't mean that you can't still use those teams. You can use each other, in fact, to make slight upgrades at this point. I don't think there's probably going to be like a league winner sitting there, maybe, but you can still make some gradual moves. And I think that's the difference between dynasty and redraft at this point in the season in general, is if it's redraft, it feels like you can maybe still have a couple of big uppercut punches left in you off of waivers, potentially. Again, guys that we're going to talk about, or again, kind of if you're able to trade right now, and I don't like maybe that redraft can trade right now, to be honest, but if you can, I think there's still a couple of big swings you can make.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are definitely things you can do. So let's get into it. Who are you targeting off of waivers?
This is a surprise name. I didn't know this name before this last week. Had no idea who this person was, that they were on an NFL roster. But the Jets have themselves a nice little spark in the backfield by the name of Zonovan Knight. Michael Carter sprained his ankle. He left that game. James Robinson, we talked about earlier in the drunk trade, who was traded to the Jets, was a healthy scratch this past week. And that allowed Zonovan Knight to get a plenty of action. And looks like he's kind of maybe the guy right now. So the Jets had come out and basically said, like, what, why did he get so much work? And he was getting a fair amount of work even before Michael Carter left. Why was he activated ahead of James Robinson, who, again, you just traded for? And they said, basically, we need a spark to this offense. We need a spark in this backfield. So he comes out, puts up about 70 yards rushing, another 34 receiving, and looked really solid. So James Robinson, I don't know what happens next week. If Michael Carter remains injured, I'm sure they'll activate James Robinson, but it feels like a hot hand situation, especially for a team like that, who, again, desperately needs something in the running game. So I think Zonovan Knight is a kind of blow the rest of your fab player. Because I think even if Carter and or Robinson are healthy, he's going to have a pretty significant role. And that's tough to find with running backs right now, besides the obvious folks. Maybe you can find a Mike Boone or a Latavius Murray that's more to your liking, but Zonovan would be more to mine.
Yeah, I like that. So one player I think that could help you, and this is a bit, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this player here, Jake, just because of the team situation. So the player I'm looking at is Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I'm looking at ESPN here, and he's only rostered in 42% of leagues. So chances are he's out there, and he's quietly had a kind of a solid season here as someone that is not like a top tier wide receiver, with the exception of this last week against Tampa Bay. I mean, he's been putting up at least double-digit points most weeks here for you. Now, I know the caveat here is that Deshaun Watson is coming back. All this has been happening with Jacoby Brissett. So, Jake, what are your thoughts with Watson coming back? How do you see this offense changing? And do you still think that would be a good move for someone that isn't really rostered, that maybe with Deshaun Watson gives this offense a little bolt of lightning, and it kind of raises all fantasy assets on the team? What do you think?
It's tough to say for sure who Deshaun Watson is going to target primarily in this offense. The assumption would still be Amari Cooper is kind of the main man, which is fine. That makes sense. But there's room in this offense, surprisingly, for two wide receivers. And like you said, DPJ has had, prior to last week's bummer game, he had like 5 games straight with at least 60 yards. I think at least 4 or 5 catches in each of those games as well. I don't see that it could possibly be a downgrade unless the rust has just really caught up. I mean, let's be honest. Deshaun Watson has not played in the NFL for quite some time.
Almost 2 years at this point.
I don't know that that's being talked about enough, really.
I agree.
Maybe he's been practicing on his own or whatever, but like the logistics of his suspension and him sitting out the year prior made it such that he couldn't practice. He was not practicing with the team. So that's weird. And so I'm cautious to say that this is going to be like a smash for Donovan Peoples-Jones, but it's also tough to say, Jacoby Brissett, great NFL quarterback, I believe. I think he's a really good, solid player. But for fantasy, you would assume still there will be some uptick from Watson taking over. Right. I just caution that it's going to be like this massive, crazy, awesome escalator to the top for everybody.
No, I definitely agree with that. I was just more curious to see if you thought that, would this be even a incremental upgrade for the offense, or you just kind of like, yeah, he's been sitting for 2 years. I mean, his muscles should be all nice and relaxed, so you shouldn't have any cramping issues there. But I couldn't help it; it's a low hanging fruit.
The lowest.
So yeah, I was just curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah. But to be fair, I think even without an upgrade, Donovan Peoples-Jones is still a great pickup. I think it was a great pickup 2 weeks ago, as much as he is now. So,
all right,
I'd still do it.
So, who do you got next?
One interesting name that's out there for wide receivers. We talked about Christian Kirk earlier, but Zay Jones is having his own sort of come up. And it's been really impressive to see Zay Jones. I'm just sticking in the Z range, I just realized now. And let's see how long I can keep that up for the rest of the show. I'm going to guess not long. But for right now, at least, Zay Jones has been really heavily involved in the Jaguars offense. I would say, it's been hit or miss for most of the season, but the last 3 or so weeks, he's really started to get some high usage. And unfortunately, that means Marvin Jones has kind of sunk back into the background, which it happens. But against Baltimore, I mean, the dude had 14 targets and 145 yards. It means he's going to be a hot ad on waivers. It means that, if you don't have the top priority, you might not be able to get him. But if you're set at running back, which most teams are not, then you have an advantage here of being able to pick him up, because I think the Zonovan Knights and these other running backs, a couple more we'll talk about later, are probably going to be the bigger priorities. So if you're set at running back, Zay Jones looks awesome. Their strength of schedule is pretty solid for the rest of the season. And I think we just need to take a moment to acknowledge that the Jaguars are back on track. Trevor Lawrence is back on track. So this whole team looks pretty set up for a playoff push. So really any pieces that I can get, I'm going to be trying to do that. And he has just great matchups the rest of the way. So again, all in on Zay Jones.
Yeah, he's been looking good. I'm happy for the man. Glad that he's kind of having a resurgence here in his career. Because I know he was a real hot commodity coming out of the rookie draft. Was that probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point, and then had his kind of off-field stuff that kind of looked like it was going to derail his career. So great to see that he's in a good situation and performing well. Always like a good redemption story.
Heck yes. Who do you have that's on tap to redeem a fantasy team that might be struggling here?
So there's 2 guys I'm looking at here, and they're right by each other on the list I'm looking at here. But I think I could talk about both of them. They're both wide receivers. So the first one here is Darius Slayton. He is really the only healthy, viable wide receiver option on that Giants offense right now. And it shows. I mean, he's been just going off against a little bit tougher Dallas defense. He still put up 9.3 points. Let's be honest, he's probably not going to be he's going to be a flex play for you every week, assuming your roster is set up well and you're making this push for the playoffs. So having him as like a flex play with these remaining bye weeks, or someone as a wide receiver 3, maybe if you're fighting through some injuries. I mean, he's been putting up close to 15 points a week almost every week since he kind of became the focal point of this offense. And the Giants, why they play Philly twice, which is a bummer. The rest of their schedule doesn't look too bad here down the stretch. So I think you can, like I said, I think he's going to be a good flex option for you week in and week out. And then the other guy quickly here was Treylon Burks. And he's finally back. He's healthy. We've seen the Titans make a concerted effort to get him the ball, make him involved in this offense. And it's really showing why they drafted him so highly or traded away AJ Brown, who's a stud, and decided to draft a guy that they're saying, oh yeah, he's basically AJ Brown. And now, he's coming off 2 big weeks. I would expect this treatment for him to keep going and keep getting more and more involved in this offense.
I love it. I'm going to keep us on the wide receiver track for a little bit then. Since you put us on these rails, I'm going to try not to derail us in talking about Elijah Moore, a name that I thought would only have a negative connotation after about week 4 on. Elijah Moore, turns out, along with the rest of the team, just needed a change of quarterback, which I think a lot of us were hoping would happen. I wanted to believe in Zach Wilson, and I wanted to believe that last season's ending was going to carry over to this season because he looked better to end last year, and it just didn't happen. And he's kind of a dick. He won't take accountability for his bad play, and that made me very happy to see the one and only Mike White show up last week, ball the hell out, and just as importantly, get both Garrett Wilson, who is almost assuredly not on waivers, and Elijah Moore, who very much probably is heavily involved, heavily fantasy relevant. Elijah Moore becomes the second, Dustin, I would say, waiver wire ad for me in wide receiving camp behind Treylon Burks. So it's Treylon Burks, then Elijah Moore, then Zay Jones in order of appearance on that list. But he didn't get a ton of targets, and that's the thing that still concerns you, obviously. But like his mentality after the game was so different in the interviews. If you saw with Elijah Moore, he was all fired up, jacked, just ready to be involved. And so I think his usage does go up even more. It sucks you don't have to rely on a touchdown every week, and that's obviously what did most of the damage this past week. But as long as Mike White is in there, then I'm good with it. But I caution, if there's any inkling that they release and they start to waver and go, maybe Zach Wilson will be back in next week, then I pump the brakes on this. But I'm moving full steam ahead if Mike White is the guy.
Yeah, I like that. Do you have any concerns that he only saw 2 targets this week, or do you think that was a function of the game plan or just new quarterback coming in?
I think it was just an issue of Garrett Wilson being really, really good in that particular game and Zonovan Knight being really, really good in that particular game. And I think as both of those start to see a little bit of a natural regression, then I think it's going to open up still more for Elijah Moore. I hate the any name more puns, and they're almost impossible to avoid. I didn't even want to say that one. But I do think I would rather take Elijah Moore with, let's say, an average of 3 targets per game with Mike White than I would an average of 8 targets a game with Zach Wilson. That is how strongly I am on board with that kind of changeover.
No, I don't disagree with you there. I was just curious to know if that maybe change your thoughts a little bit on him or not.
Yeah, fair enough. And you know what? As I say, I think I want Zay Jones above him now that I say it, because there's still the albatross of what if Mike White doesn't get another chance? What if Zach Wilson does come back in? And so,
or what if it's Joe Flacco?
Hey, if it's Joe Flacco, I'm good. I'm good with Joe or with Mike. And then I'm even better with Elijah Moore if Joe Flacco comes in. But there is a little bit of, I suppose, the possibility that Zach Wilson ruins this for us.
I agree. I think there is, he might sit out a couple weeks here, last week, maybe this week, just to let him, get his head on straight, get his head away from all his friends' mothers, I guess, I don't know.
He's just going to have more time to text them from the sidelines. That's the problem.
This is true. That's a true story. All right, let's move on here, Jake.
Let's do it.
So let's talk trades. And I know you said this in the outset here, the beginning, that you don't think that there should be trades at this point for redraft leagues.
For a redraft, correct.
Okay. It's just too much opportunity for bad trades to get made.
This
Is
is where
that the whole
collusion
idea?
thrives. This is the point where collusion thrives. And I think most redraft leagues shut it down, at least during the playoffs, which is great. And that's
Mhm.
wonderful. But I would say at this point in the season, when things have pretty much been set, there's so
Lock
much
it down.
opportunity. When teams can really start being mathematically eliminated legitimately at this point going into week 13, that pretty much is. We
Mhm.
got 2 weeks left before the playoffs. There's a lot of hinkiness. And you know my stance on vetoes, I hate vetoing. So I don't
Right.
want to have to use that. Like, I just want the everybody be cool model, which I think is involving shutting down
Right.
trades now.
Right. But you are pro no trade deadline for Dynasty.
Correct. That you
Alright.
trade as long as you want, as much as you want, because those teams that are out of it and eliminated, fine, let them get the better draft pick. I don't care about that as long as they're starting their, best players, good lineup, etc.
Mhm.
Make the trades. Make as many trades as you want.
Yep. And for all the people out there that are saying, well, it causes unbalance in the league, it does not. It doesn't. I mean, we were in one of my leagues last year, right before the finals of the playoffs. It was right over Christmas. There was just a flurry of trades, and I was involved in a big boy one. I mean, just a flurry of trades, and here we are. It's not like there's one super dominant team in our league because they made good trades and the other, hosed over the other teams. No, that's just not how it works.
And in Dynasty, there's no incentive to make a bad trade. In redraft, again, that's where collusion comes in, and I understand that. In Dynasty, there's no reason for that. You're still trying to better your team for next year if you're out of the playoffs
Exactly.
this year. So that's some boo hockey, I will say. I don't believe in that. But I made a trade very recently. 2 weeks ago, I traded for Josh Jacobs. I just want to give myself a little tiny pat on the back there. If I can, traded away Michael Carter, and I believe it was a first-round pick to make that happen. And then I
Nice.
got back Adam Thielen and Josh Jacobs. And I only say this as a way to, of course, make myself sound so smart. But really, I want to talk about Adam Thielen, who is a part of this trade. Because if we're talking about trade targets in your league, Adam Thielen, I still don't think is a sexy name.
No,
Would you agree with that?
I would concur 100%.
And this is somebody that, if he hasn't been picked over by the vultures on your dynasty leagues for that, middling bottom team that doesn't believe they're in the playoffs or is eliminated, Thielen's kind of a great target because his cost cannot be that high.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to give up a second-round pick for him, I would actually be shocked. I don't think that you have to do that. I think that you can do even a lower pick with some sort of upside youth player thrown in. Whatever the youth of the moment is, because people don't even care. They're just like, well, he's not going to help me this year. He's not going to help me next year, probably. So get him the hell off. And sending, again, a couple of third-round picks. Maybe you have one of these younger tight ends that people are interested in. Who's I'm blanking on his name. The Cardinals at tight end behind Zach Ertz.
Trey McBride.
Thank you. Somebody like that easily gets this thing done. And I'm fully with that because we've seen Adam Thielen, even when TJ Hawkinson got traded there and people thought that it was the death knell for any sort of value. All he does is continue to get targeted. And yeah, he's going to have a couple of downer games. I understand that. But wide receiver is also kind of tough right now. I mean, the Cooper Kupps of the world are gone. There's some high value guys that are gone, and he presents an immediate upgrade and touchdown kind of juju for you. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty into him. Would you trade for him in in Dynasty at this point? If you were a contender, is there a limit to what you'd give?
If I was a contender, absolutely, I would trade for him because this offense most weeks looks really good. I mean,
Mhm.
even with the addition of TJ Hawkinson, like their offense is even better. I mean, like he was a piece that they needed to make that offense go. So yeah, I think Thielen is a great choice. He's a hog around the end zone. So yeah, if you're a competing team, I like that move to go after Thielen because I think, yeah, he is not a guy. He's not a sexy name guy. He's an old wide receiver, but still scoring points. So I like that a lot.
And just a little sprinkle of fairy dust to transition this one out. He gets Green Bay in week 17, which is your fantasy football championships. That's a matchup that I'm very okay with considering how that defense looks right now.
Oof. Oof.
Just saying. Who's one of your trade targets for this time if you're a contender?
I don't know that I have anyone specific in mind. I mean, I'm thinking, with just how volatile the running back situation is, if you could pick up a guy like a Jeff Wilson or someone that's that kind of, RB2, RB3 with some upside, I think that's a move to make just to shore up your running back room because you never know what can happen, especially with the running backs because it drops off so goddamn fast. So getting a guy that can have the boom weeks like Jeff Wilson, we've seen, I think that is a savvy move you can make.
Yeah, I think if you can't pick up one of these free agent waiver wire guys, again, Donovan Knight, Jaylen Warren, if it turns out that Najee Harris is out for an extended amount of time, which it sounds like he will be. If Jaylen Warren is healthy, then he's another guy you could pick up off of waivers. But barring that, I wholeheartedly agree with this concept of targeting that running back that is not so such a superstar. That I don't want to, at this point in time, trade for a Nick Chubb. I don't want to trade for an Austin Eckler to try to solidify that. I just feel like it's giving away too much at a position where you're not guaranteed to get that benefit next year. But like you said, there's these mid-tier guys. A James Conner, I think, is a good name to throw in there as well. Somebody who, I don't think anybody's wanting to really hang on to James Conner for next year. He's too volatile. And so those types of guys, you're not going to have to break the bank for. But if you want to trade for Isaiah Pacheco right now, you're probably going to have to give up just as much or more to get him, and he's less proven, and I don't think has much necessarily upside. So I'm with you on that one. A good name, by the way, that fits into that category for me is also David Montgomery. I think David Montgomery is still just the middling. Nobody knows what the hell to do with him, but he's set up for amazing fantasy success the rest of this year. His matchups are fantastic, and we've seen him do this now. It would be the third year in a row if it happens, where after week 8 or 9, he just pushes every middling fantasy team to the playoffs and sometimes the championships because he just blows the hell up in the back half of the year. And again, he's literally set up for that exact type of thing right now. The Bears have an amazing strength of schedule for the rest of the way out for the running backs. And again, I don't think you're going to have to give up too much for him. I think a second round pick would probably get that done or close to it. You might have to add a little sweetener into it, but I think that could make it a success, a smashing success for you.
All right, Jake, do you have any other advice for whether you're going for the ship or trying to make the playoffs? Because I'll be honest, I mean, if you're close to making the playoffs, make the push because anything can happen. The number one seed could shit the bed and your team can go off. Anything can happen here. So just making the playoffs. Well, I know some people are like, I don't want to just make the playoffs and be kind of a middling fantasy team. But seriously though, anything can happen when you get in there. I mean, you see it every year on Twitter. My team barely scraped in and ended up winning the championship because, hey, it happens more than you think. So definitely, if you think you are just going up against some bad beats right now. Teams that are worse than you are having, huge bumper weeks, and just, nothing you can do about that. Make that push, be honest about it. When we talked about it with our contender pretender episode, be honest about your team. And it's like, if you've just had some bad beats, go for it and just hope for the best come playoff time.
I fully agree. The time to make those decisions when you're wavering back and forth, am I in, am I out, is past. That's already passed.
Mhm.
If you're mathematically there, make the push. What you benefit from maybe going in and losing, maybe you'll fall back a couple of draft spots for next year's rookie draft. So be it at this point. I am not trying to be, I really want the 104 instead of maybe I'm the 107.
Right.
I'm gonna take this opportunity to, like you said, just try and get in, cause as much havoc and chaos as possible, and maybe win that damn championship.
Mhm.
So in that vein, again, still be persistent with trades if your league allows you to do that at the moment. Do not give up on waivers. And again, scope out the other teams. That's my biggest just general takeaway. Scope out the other teams to see what their needs are, and don't be afraid to play defensively on the waivers. Do that, especially if you're going up against these teams in the next couple of weeks. That's savvy. I know some people might call it dirty ball. I don't.
No.
I would say that's just being savvy and really having.
It's part of the gamesmanship.
Yes, gamesmanship. It's just being aware of your league. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great thing.
That's right. All right, let's move on from this here and finish off how we've been finishing up every episode here in season, going up with some starts of the week. So last week, Jake, you had Gerald Everett going up against Arizona in a very juicy matchup. Not so juicy end of the day.
No.
Had backup quarterback playing, which was unfortunate. Ended with 7.8 points and tight end 15. I really thought that was a good call for you. Disappointed. I've been a big Gerald Everett fan this season. So yeah, I'm disappointed with that. I had Ramondre Stevenson against Minnesota. I will take this as a victory. Ended up as RB7 with 20.2 points. So
heck yes.
Good job to me.
My
Jake,
goodness.
Yes. Who do you have this week?
I have somebody that hopefully will allow me to say good job to me next week when we revisit this. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I talked about this guy as a waiver ad. I'm making him my start of the week. It's Zay Jones, who gets to play against the Detroit Lions. Again, I talked about last week's production. I think that is not the obviously, 11 catches for 145 yards. That's going to be tough to beat or even match. But I do feel like a 100-yard game is again well within his wheelhouse with how that team's been performing. The Lions have been bad in coverage too, and this really lines up as a juicy matchup for him. So, hoping for a top 10 week here, which I think he can get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've got for this week, same game, ironically, other side of the field. I've got DeAndre Swift going against Jacksonville here. I know his usage has been pretty limited. I know he's been a little dinged up, though. I do like this matchup going against the Jags defense, and I think he's due for some positive regression this week. And I think he's just going to be much more involved. I think coming off of the short week last week, like I said, still kind of recovering from his injury, that it was easier for them just to let Jamal basically be the bell cow for that game. And I think it's going to get back to a little bit more than to what we've seen this season, where, DeAndre Swift will carry most of the work, and then Jamal Williams will come in at the goal line and vulture all the touchdowns.
As he does. That's his favorite thing to do. And it's my favorite thing to watch. As a viewer, that's what I love to see.
No, but I do think things get back to a little bit more normal usage for him this week.
Hey, 8 targets last week. That is a fantastic number for a running back. So I hope you're right. But also I hope that Jamal Williams still scores like 3 touchdowns.
Well, obviously.
Obviously.
Who doesn't like that mermaid?
This is an interesting. This is maybe one of the first times we've ever done the same game as our starts of the week. Now it's your turn to make our bet, our beer bet.
Oh,
and our process is to do, within the same game. Now it's up to, typically we do positionally and we do the same position. This is an interesting opportunity if you wanted to go that way for the starts of the week bet, or you could branch us out into something completely different.
Yeah, let me look at here the slate of games real quick, see if there's anything that jumps out.
Quick like a hawk.
I know.
Both daily and nightly. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and I'll blow to the extreme. I recommend. Vanilla, don't come for us. That was with under 10 seconds. There are, while you're considering, by the way, there are some pretty great matchups that I'm excited for. I will be attending, by the way, the Packers versus Bears game. That's not one that I'm excited for. Yeah, I'm going to Chicago for that.
Still fun to go to that, though.
It'll be fun, but I'm not as thrilled as I once would have been when that was on the docket for this week, but should be good nonetheless. And I am very interested. I'll hear what you have to say first, because there's one that sticks out to me as all right. I think I got one. Okay.
We're going to go with we're going with the Chargers and the Raiders.
Not what I was thinking of. Okay.
We're going to go Austin Eckler v. Josh Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs, who just was, I think, the highest performer of any position this week, if I'm not mistaken. Wow. Eckler, though, too. That's tough. That's a good one. Hey, I'm proud of you for not doing a fucking shit show of a.
Yay!
Let's do the backup wide receiver 3 versus the wide receiver 4. None of that shit. Let me take a quick peek. I feel like I probably have to do my guy justice. I just talked about trading for him in that dynasty league. I think matchup be damned. I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs.
Jacob takes Jacobs.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. Then I'll get a root for him in my dynasty.
We're just going to say PPR points.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I'm just making sure we're clear. That's all.
You betcha. That's a good one. I'm excited for that one. I think that matchup will be very fun. I was actually looking at another running back matchup, curious if you would lean this way, because the Browns and the Texans are playing against each other. Of course, because Deshaun Watson's return game has to be this dumb fucking revenge narrative thing. But the backfield, Nick Chubb versus Dameon Pierce, I thought would be interesting too. But I like this one. I think this one will be more exciting.
Good. I'm glad you approve, Jake, because that's all I ever want is your approval.
I fucking knew it. Fucking knew it. It's nice to hear you say it.
All right. Any last words here, Jake, before we sign off for the week?
Godspeed to everybody. I hope that your week 13 goes thrillingly. If it doesn't, just tweet at us and let us know your pain, and we'll try to console you in whatever way that we can, maybe with a limerick or something fun to keep your spirits high.
There you go. We do have 2 teams on bye this week after the no bye week last week. So we've got Arizona and Carolina on bye. Good luck. I just want to say good luck to all the SFB teams still in the playoffs, because playoffs did start this last week. I know there's a lot of number of my 11 slot drafters still in the playoffs. So good luck to them. Good luck to everyone out there. May your fantasy teams be a boon for you this week. I don't know. I got lost what I was saying there, if you couldn't tell.
No, I like it. Let it be a boon. Let it be a Mike boon for you this week.
There you go. As always, go out, give us a rate and review wherever you're able to on your podcast app. It helps everyone find us more. In fact, better yet, instead of just giving us a rate and review, share it with the world. Tell everyone, hey, go check out Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football. They're terrific. Go find us on our YouTube page. We go stream live here every single Tuesday, 6:30 Central Time. You can't miss us. You see our beautiful faces that were made for TV. And it's a lot of fun. You come into the chat. We will answer all your questions live on the stream if you join us live. So please do that. I think that's all I've kind of babbled on here. Enough. And until next week, folks, peace, love, and humptiness forever.
Cheers, FFers.